And welcome to the Kongversation Mini. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Mitchell Wolfe.
And for the last several days, Mitchell, we have been playing Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair. So Playtonic generously gave us some review codes well in advance of the game's October 8th release. And so we're going to give our spoiler-free first impressions. And don't worry, the conversation will be going into deeper, spoilery pools of goodness about the game as the weeks go on. But for now, I wanted to put our thoughts out there in the days still before its official release. By royal command, we couldn't go public with any of this until today. So this is the earliest we could put any of this out there.
I was even told that I couldn't tell anyone I have it. So that's how secretive it's been.
So are we breaking the rules right now by telling each other that we have it?
Theoretically, I suppose, but I don't know.
Daly's
going to have to deal with that one.
Yeah, no. we're going to get a lashing. Real quick, though, due diligence. I know it's a mini, but we got to do some due diligence. I want to plug DK Vine on Patreon, dkvine.com/Patreon. If you like any of the content DK Vine puts out, that is how we stay financially viable. So check it out. Get great rewards by backing us, dkvine.com/Patreon. And be sure, if you're interested in Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, and I'm sure you are if you're listening to this, if you just stumbled into this podcast and you have no idea what Yuka or Laylee are, then I apologize. But be sure to listen to the episode that Jeff and I did that immediately preceded this one, where we sat down with Gavin Price last week for a great interview. It was a lot of fun. Gavin Price, the head of Playtonic. If you don't know who Yuka and Laylee are, you surely don't know who Gavin Price is. And also be sure to check out the interview Mitchell did with him on the Super Jump podcast back in August. Yeah, so lots of Gavin Price goodness to go around. Lots of Mitchell and I to go around with Gavin Price. Just get a whole mess of it in your eardrums. There
just
you go.
Just the three of us. We should go on like a road trip or something.
We should. I feel like we're close enough now.
Well, we've recorded one podcast with him, so definitely.
So, let's just get right into it. What do we think about Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair? Well, I'll start, since this is my show.
Fair enough. Can't argue with those rules.
For me, Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair, it's really like a warm hug from a long-lost love. That is what the game feels like. It is not classic Donkey Kong Country. Let me just preface all of this by saying it's not just Donkey Kong Country, because I don't want people to have this misconception that that's what it is. But it's a lot like what classic Donkey Kong Country would be if it had a chance to evolve and be followed up on by Rare. It obviously pulls in influence from numerous places, and it's, plenty innovative in its own right, but I feel like Impossible Lair will feel most immediately comfortable to vets and fans of the first three Donkey Kong Country games.
More so than the retro games, would you say?
Yes. And I feel like specifically this is what Donkey Kong Country 4 would have no doubt felt like had they just kept making them. Like, imagine it's 1997 and they released Donkey Kong Country 4 for the Nintendo 64. I feel like in some ways it would play a lot like Impossible Lair does, at least in some of the concepts it introduces and some of the stuff it really does evolve. Namely, like the overworld. I feel like that is just a natural evolution of where DKC 3 left off, with getting a little bit more creative with it, getting having some explorative elements, having this top-down overworld. I feel like completely beefs up what would normally be a very boring part of a 2D platformer, and that just going from world to world. It's basically a whole game unto itself, and we'll be getting into the overworld a lot more because I have a lot of gushing I want to do about it, Mitchell. But,
yeah.
It's like, you brought up the retro games, and I love the Retro Studio Donkey Kong Country games. I don't want anybody to take any misconceptions away from this, that I have any qualms with them, or that I I hold points against them because they changed some things, but I know there are Donkey Kong Country fans out there who can never fully embrace or just wrap their heads around the somewhat significant changes made to the gameplay and presentation there. And for those people, I really do feel like Impossible Lair, it's the game for them. Like, full stop, this is what you've been missing. And look, I'm not going to like compare directly Impossible Lair to Tropical Freeze. I'm not going to say which one I prefer. That's for another day. And I really feel like Impossible Lair can be sold on its own merits rather than just stacking it up to what has come before.
I definitely agree with that part. I would argue, though, that it is also a lot like the retro games in at least in terms of game feel.
Okay.
The way Yooka walks around, the way Yooka and Laylee roll, the way certain compartments within the level are like faded into transparency, so you can see behind them and you can like go to secret parts of the level like that. And especially the way the collectibles, how they're lined up throughout the levels, although we'll, I'm sure, get back to that point. A lot of that is from Retro's Donkey Kong Country, but it is really not as close to Tropical Freeze as a lot of people, I think, initially jumped to because of the aesthetic art style similarities to Tropical Freeze, which are, like, for sure there. But there's so many other things. Though your hit point system is from Yoshi's Island, where if you get hit, Laylee will fly around and you need to collect her like Yoshi collects Baby Mario. And your the overworld exploration, in your interview with Gavin Price, which I listened to because it's good, he brought up how one of the original inspirations for the overworld actually was Super Mario World. And I feel that. There's some stuff in there that, like, if you imagine a Super Mario World where you can actually just walk around the overworld freely and you don't have to just travel along a straight line, I think they kind of nailed how that feels, how finding secret levels feels, how hitting a yellow switch in the overworld and it affecting other levels. That definitely comes across in this game. And whether you're into 2D platforming Mario games, whether you're into 2D platforming Yoshi games or Donkey Kong games, there's a lot in here for a lot of fans of I would say maybe not every 2D platformer, but at least the more difficult ones. Because it is a difficult game. It can get kind of hard. But if you're fine with that, if that's something that you have gotten past in other games, I think you will like this game.
It pulls a lot of things from my favorite Mario games and refines some stuff I didn't really care for. Like, I never really cared for the whole Yoshi's Island mechanic of Baby Mario getting carried away in a bubble. But what this game does is it marries it more closely to what's familiar for, say, Donkey Kong fans, where, you know, you'll lose Laylee within a few seconds if you don't grab her, but then you keep playing as Yooka, and you can get Laylee back by hitting the game's equivalent to a DK barrel, which are the bat bells. So a lot of it is familiar, but it definitely has its own take on it. Really, it's the most joyous gaming experience I've had this year. Maybe it's one of the most joyous gaming experiences I've had in several years. And I say that as the co-founder and editor of DK Vine, the editor-in-chief of DK Vine, whatever that means. This is a game that's really made for, I think, the type of people who visit our site. It's the kind of game they look for and that they've been wanting for a long time now. This is a game made for us, and I'm giddy about that. I'm a giddy man right now, Mitchell. I'm tee-heeing, and I have my finger to my mouth in my dimples while I look, very, very cute with my pigtails. I don't know what I'm saying, but
well, I'm proud of your general appearance. I'm proud that you respect yourself in the mirror like that. Just one more thing about that. Like, I think this is a really good sign for Playtonic. There were a lot of great things in the first Yooka-Laylee game, and a lot of things that needed some work. And while there are still moments in Impossible Lair that I think do reflect team size and budget of a smaller game, like if you want to compare, this is why it's a little iffy for me comparing it to Tropical Freeze. The main reason is Tropical Freeze is funded by one of the biggest video game companies there are, and made in a huge studio where a lot of people were working on it for a good amount of time. And Impossible Lair is not that. It is an indie game in every monetary way, right? So the production values of just graphics, how many cutscenes there are or aren't, how many of little elements can even be drawn, because every little bit of that costs money. That is probably going to be a little less than Tropical Freeze, and I think people who are only coming to this style of game for that, I don't know, they'll probably find it to be less than Tropical Freeze. But there's so many other things this game does, just from a creative perspective, that are really, really interesting, and I think really worth looking into.
Honestly, the budget thing, you barely notice it, because it does so much to fill those holes where, it doesn't have this big elaborate cutscene like Tropical Freeze did. And here we are comparing it. I don't mean to, but it does so much else. It kind of distracts the brain. You don't worry about that. It feels so polished and so just completely competent and just above excellent that, yeah, you would never guess that it would be an indie game unless you walked into it knowing full well that it was. Like, when you look at the credits and you look at the team size, it's kind of astonishing what they were able to pull off. Well, let's go through some of these points bit by bit. Remember, this is a spoiler-free first impressions, so we're not going to be getting into any specifics, but we will be talking broad strokes, and then we'll be getting into some of my favorite bits in future episodes, because I have a lot I want to say about this. I've been kind of mentally taking notes as I play, and also just frantically taking screenshots. I'm playing it on my Switch. I don't know what platform you're playing it on, Mitchell.
I am also playing it on Switch.
Okay. Yeah, so I have been filling up my memory card with just all my favorite bits as they happen.
1 second before we go, I'd feel like a bad journalist if I didn't do this. In the interest of full discretion, speaking of the credits earlier, we are both in it. So just, heads up, that's a thing.
Actually, you're in the credits. I am not.
Oh, really? Okay,
No.
I made an assumption. Sorry. Well, I'm in it, so that could potentially, if you were a conspiracy theorist, lead into the idea that I would not present my thoughts on the game in an unbiased way. I'm doing my best anyway, in spite of that. So just heads up.
I'm a B character in the game, but I am not in the credits because I didn't win any contest. So I guess that means I am completely trustworthy when I give my opinions, while Mitchell is obviously going to be biased.
Yeah, because you're in the actual game and I'm just in the credits.
Funny how that works out. So anyway, the gameplay, for me, you said it felt familiar to Tropical Freeze, but I felt it was very classically Donkey Kong Country in the way it handled. It's not as floaty as Mario physics are, but it doesn't have that kind of heavy thudness that Returns in Tropical Freeze does. Probably because you're not controlling a gorilla, for most of the time, except in ancillary hard modes or multiplayer. But yeah, it feels good. It feels solid, and
it does.
It's just you immediately can pick it up, and it's not like there's much of a learning curve at all. If you're anywhere familiar with this type of 2D platformer, you'll know what to do from the outset.
Yeah, one of my criticisms of the first game, sorry to keep bringing it into it. I feel like this is the pattern we go to. You say something nice, and then I always undercut it every time. But,
that's why we make such effective police interrogators, Mitchell.
Yeah.
I butter up the suspect, and you break them down.
We have hard times giving away compliments, but we don't have hard times putting away criminals. What I was going to say was, one of the criticisms I levied at the first game was that they were doing platforming really well. Yooka and Laylee controlled really soundly, but then they were also doing a lot of transformations and a lot of Kartos minigames and a lot of Rextro minigames. And all of these things, I felt took away from the key thing that they were doing well. And I like every time the game would take me away from that to do something else, I'd feel like, no, just do the one thing. It can be shorter. The game can be smaller. You don't even need to replace it with anything. Just take it out. Like, do the one thing you do well, really well. And I am pleased to say that Impossible Lair is two things, and that's it. Like, it is the overworld, and it is side-scrolling. And it does both of those things really well.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people that have compared them to the rare Donkey Kong Country games have noticed the absence of an analog for animal bodies or the like minecart stages, stuff like that you might expect to see there. And that is not there, but at the same time, that stuff could possibly have the effect of distracting from what I think is just some of the most solid, real feeling platforming in a really long time. It looks good, it feels good, it does the one thing really well.
It's all manageable. Everything in the game makes sense, and that includes collectibles. So, 2D platformers don't have the reputation that 3D platformers got over the years as being just mindless collectathons. And but I feel like they even refined the 2D platformer collectible down to just something really simple. So within a stage, you've got quills, which are sort of a combination of both bananas and banana coins because they're abundant. They kind of serve the same purpose that bananas do in your Donkey Kong games, but at the same time, they're used for monetary purposes on the overworld. So it's just a nice marriage of the two, I guess.
So quills are a currency that you can spend on unlocking the tonics that you find. That is the point of quills.
Yes, and you can also pay off planker signs for hints on where to find other tonics, because some of them are hidden on the overworld. You also have to use them to unlock keys that are in cages and different things. And it's a good way to get you to replay stages too when you want to build up your quills, because at first I was like, oh, wow, I'm never going to run out of quills. And then very quickly, once I started finding the tonics, I was like, oh, I need more quills because I am running low on funds.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I am at the point, no spoilers, but I have finished the game. In terms of beat the final boss, there are a couple, and I do think just a couple, secret collectibles around the map that I still need to find. But at this point, I've spent most of the quills on things that I needed to get to there. And for the most part, the quills are going to be sunk into your tonics. That is where you're going to be using them the most. There are a lot of tonics I have not yet unlocked, and I don't have enough quills to do so. So I will have to grind through some levels again. I'll have to replay a level many times in order to get enough quills to buy all the tonics, if that is a goal of mine. And I think it might be. I think I want to get all the stuff in this game.
Yeah, and we'll get into more of tonics. I feel like that deserves its own little spotlight here in this episode. But the other main collectible you find in stages are twit coins. And twit coins Essentially, they serve the same challenge of something like Dragon or Star coins in the Mario platformers, or the puzzle pieces in Retro's games, where they just they're hidden like 5 per stage in some very challenging or difficult kind of off the grid places where you have to kind of think outside the box and, you know, look on the margins and kind of get creative with finding them. But Twit coins are then used to pay Trouser on the overworld so he can drop his cleverly titled paywalls so you can progress further on the overworld.
Yeah. That's the gist of most of the collectibles. Oh, except the bees.
Well, the bees are another clever addition. If you listen to our Gavin Price interview, like, the bees were a concept they came up with to basically, you know, if we let people play the first or the final level from the outset, you know, what incentive do they have to play the rest of the game? And that's to get more hit points for this absurdly hard challenge. So that's where the bees come in. You complete a stage. No matter how well you do, no matter how many quills you collect, no matter if you find all the Twit coins, at the end of every stage is a bee encased in a glass hive, one of the battalion members, and you break the glass and you rescue the bee, who then flies back to Queen Phoebe in front of the entrance to the Impossible Lair.
Right, and there's even a few bees that are not attached to the main levels
yes.
that are rewards for finding secrets, which is always something I'm into.
So, yeah, those are the collectibles, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. Everything is so well thought out in this game. That's the great part. There's nothing that, like, hasn't been considered, both for how it affects the gameplay and also how it affects, like, the lore and consistency of the Yooka-Laylee world, which, of course, I appreciate on an even deeper level than how the game plays, because I'm a terrible gamer. But now you've beaten the game, essentially. I've only played through the first 5 chapters.
To be clear, there's a lot of things in the game that I have not yet done. I haven't gotten all of the bees. I haven't gotten all of the tonics. I have beaten every level and I've gotten every coin. And as of like 3 minutes before we started recording, I have beaten the Impossible Lair itself.
Okay.
Proving, I think this might be the first recorded proof that it is possible. At least as much as you can assume me saying I did it is proof.
Yeah, you could be lying. But yeah, I you know, so when I say I've only played 5 stages plus 3 state change variations, like essentially 8 levels, that's underselling though how much I've done, because the overworld is huge, and it's a huge surprise for me, because they were really like selling the overworld when the game was announced, but I don't think any of us were that much focused on it, because, oh, you know, 2D platformer, hey, look at this. But the overworld, it's a brilliant game in its own right, and I'm sort of amazed to discover how much fun I'm having with it, to the point where I kind of look forward to it even more so than the 2D stages. Not to undersell them, but it's rich, it's deep, it's complex, and it's basically, if you've played Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge, if we're going to keep it in a DK Vine like terminology book here, it's way better. It's just a fun game that could have been the entire game right there. And it's just such a clever way of doing this. Rather than just getting from point A to point B, you obviously see the Super Mario World inspiration in there, but more so than that, it's just the freedom you have to just basically go and explore, and, you know, oh, I'm going to roll through this patch of grass, or I'm going to stomp on this and see if it unearths anything. And it's also just loaded with so many character appearances and cameos. You know, I'm amazed at how they find new purposes for these characters from this 3D platformer that would have no role in this game. But they find a way to work them in, and in a way that doesn't betray any of these characters. It it's honestly impressive and astonishing just how creative they got with bringing some elements back.
But yeah, there's an idea in game design called quiet time, which is basically, I'm sure it's obvious from the name, but like, if you're doing something repeatedly that is intensive and fast paced, or just takes a lot of mind power, to do that and then to immediately jump to another version of that, but maybe even harder, is exhausting. Right? It'll wear on you. It's not something that you can consistently do with any degree of assumed perseverance, right? You will eventually break down if you have that. The levels in Impossible Lair are really well designed, but because they are so well designed, they can get really flowy, which is just fantastic. That's what you want out of a 2D platformer level, where you are, without trying to be like a crazy speedrunner about it, you can do some things that feel like speedrunning-esque tricks. Rolling off of ledges and jumping out of your roll and then preserving the momentum from that roll. It gets you really fast. So when you finish a level and get dropped back in the overworld, the quiet time there is great, because it just it lets it cool down, get ready for another level by solving some more thinky puzzle than what the level's doing, and then after that thinky, quiet, slow-paced thing, you have a more think less, fast-paced, exciting thing, and it maintains the balance really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as somebody who really likes the quiet times in games, it's much appreciated to kind of have that little respite on the overworld, and
it's a good balance.
Yeah, and Gavin spoiled this on our interview, so I feel like I can bring it up. You do get to revisit areas in the overworld from the original Yooka-Laylee, specifically Shipwreck Creek, and I love that.
Right.
Yeah, I love that you can go back and check out these distinct environments that were in a 3D platformer in this like top-down environment, and you find surprises there waiting for you that you wouldn't necessarily suspect. A certain character, certain characters actually, but it's just a lot of fun. So if you haven't played the original Yooka-Laylee, I feel like you could jump into this just fine. But for those who did, I feel like they're going to get more out of it just based on the surprise reappearances of certain individuals. So that definitely makes the overworld a more special treat if you have that knowledge ahead of time.
Definitely. The area, really the entirety of Yooka-Laylee that isn't in the Grand Tomes themselves is represented in Impossible Lair as a section of the overworld. A kind of small section too. It's not not any more than like maybe a fifth.
Yeah, I also like that you see beyond the areas of the overworld of Shipwreck Creek. Just the areas you couldn't reach in the original game are represented here, so it kind of fleshes out that landscape a little bit more than we got in the very small area from the original Yooka-Laylee.
Yeah, that's cool. I really like that.
Let's talk about tonics a little bit, because tonics are also a surprise and a delight, and they're more brilliant than they were in the original Yooka-Laylee. Take that, Yooka-Laylee, man! Why aren't you as good as this game? Now, without spoiling too much, there are tonics designed for just sheer like FX novelties. They're labeled in the game as FX, so but they just turn the presentation into something silly or fun, or just change the mood. Like, you can make the game look like something off of the original Game Boy, right down to the aspect ratio. And then there are tonics that give you a slight benefit to gameplay, like adding more checkmates, which are the robotic characters that serve as checkpoints in the game. But doing that, adding something that will benefit you will come at the expense of the total amount of quills you collect per stage. So yeah, if you collect, let's say 500 quills, some of that will be subtracted for using those tonics, which whatever, that's a fair trade-off.
That's right, yeah.
If you want to get more quills, you can use a tonic that will make the game more difficult. What all these tonics do is they allow you to customize the gameplay. So however you want to play it, you can, but it doesn't deprive you of what I feel is the core essential experience of the game. And I feel like it's a nice way to add a ton more replay value to some of these stages, because you're like, oh, I want to go back and check out this stage with this tonic, and it just alters it into I don't know how many combinations you can have per stage because you use 3 tonics. You can use up to 3 tonics at a time. So I haven't done the maths, I haven't crunched the numbers, but there must be like hundreds of potential variations on a stage you can do with these tonics.
Okay, let me do it. Hang on. I can do the math. Doop, boop, 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 doop, boop, 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 boop. And the answer is, okay, so this is a theoretical maximum where not every incompatibility is taken into account. Because
I was going to say.
Some tonics don't go with each other. But
no.
if you were to ignore that, it would be 17,297,280.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. That's insane.
Yeah, because they're so if you have every tonic in the game and then also the 4 pre-order tonics, that's a total of 66. So then with that, not accepting the fact that many tonics are actually not compatible with each other, like some of the FX tonics can't be like, well, you can't be Game Boy resolution and NES resolution. That doesn't make sense at the same time. So you can't put those on together. But if you pretended you could, it would be 17,297,280.
I don't believe your numbers, Mitchell. This seems astronomically high.
So here's how I'm doing it. And okay, you know what? There's a small spoiler in the numbers that I'm doing. So if you don't want a spoiler, ignore this math. But what I'm doing is, so the first tonic can be one of 66 different things. So that's 66. Then you add a second slot. So that it could be anything except the one you did for the first tonic. So that's 65. Then the third one could be anything that you didn't do for the first 2. So that's 64. And here's the spoiler. There's a way to unlock a 4th tonic slot. So that's 63. So okay. If you do 65 times 66 times 64 times 63, you get 17 million and whatever I said. I'm pretty sure that's how math works.
I don't know how math works. That's why I work on a Donkey Kong website. The whole STEM-based careers, they've rejected me, Mitchell. This is what I resort to now.
Oh, dude, that's why I'm still in school. Careers don't work out.
Yeah. Anyway. But one of the tonics in particular actually made me tear up a little bit when I realized what it was, because I'm a sap, and that it's the tonic that basically approximates Dixie Kong's helicopter spin. And I was just like, yes, I need this in this gameplay. This is fantastic. So, yeah, a little spoiler, but I think it's a spoiler that will sell the game for a very particular breed of fan. So I've got to talk about the writing. The writing is sharp in this game. So much funnier than the original, where I felt like the original Yooka-Laylee was well written and a lot of it made me laugh, but some jokes didn't really land with me. Some jokes kind of either went over my head or just landed on the ground with a thud. But I feel like this game, it's so sharp. It cuts with razor precision, and it's self-aware, but not in an overtly cynical way. It's just the right balance.
Yeah, there's a lot less text in this game than the first game, so the opportunities to make each sentence pop are a lot more present, and it shows. Every character has something fun to say, even if it doesn't last that long, and yeah, it's great. I especially like the framing for the dialogue in this game. It's a comic book like text block. In everything that they do that makes it just a little bit more its own thing. Like Conker didn't have that, Banjo didn't have that, Donkey Kong didn't have that. That's cool. I really like that because now the aesthetic of Yooka-Laylee is turning into, well, it's a little bit comic booky, and the other games in the DKU don't really have that, so it makes it all the more unique.
Yeah, and it grows the lore of the original game, and it fleshes out that cast of characters. But honestly, this game has made me like Yooka and Laylee as characters a whole lot more than I did the first time around. There's a bit more warmth to them, if that makes any sense. They're a bit more personable, and I feel like they're not just obvious Banjo and Kazooie XPs. Like, Yooka is just the well-meaning, simple hero, and Laylee is just the crude insult machine. They're still there, and they're still like that, but I feel like there's just something about them this time around that just feels like, okay, I get them now. I get them on their own level, and not just as these carbon copies of what came before.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in the way that the characters are compared to one another, Banjo and Kazooie are obviously very opposite characters. Banjo's dumb and has a very well-mannered, well-meaning personality, pretty lazy, kind but slow. And Kazooie is mean but sharp. And that's how they are. That's how they are defined and how they work with each other. And Yooka and Laylee, in the first game, I think approximated that a bit, where they kind of had the same thing. But in this game, it's more well-defined that they are on that level. Laylee is a bit more ready to just like make fun of someone than Yooka, of course. But they're pretty similar to each other, too. Which is interesting because, if you have two characters in the main spotlight like that, you would assume that the easy thing to do would be to make them opposites. And I don't think they are opposites. I don't think anymore that they are opposites, especially with this game. Laylee has become a lot more like Yooka in terms of goals. Like, she's not going to forget the goal that you're working on in order to razz someone. She will razz someone, but it'll be on her own time,
Yeah.
And Yooka, same thing, will not completely try to play the hero card all the time and try to just be the slower counterpart to the conversation in every conversation. Sometimes Yooka can be a little mischievous on his own. And that's pretty cool.
And that makes sense too, because
they are less extremes, they are more personable, human feeling characters.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because why would two characters who are complete opposites be such good friends without wanting to throttle each other? So yeah, I like that there is just more nuance all around to their personalities. And I won't give any spoilers, but I do want to bring up, we mentioned like the writing. Yes, there are Donkey Kong references. There are some obvious shout outs and even name drops of certain characters. And like I said, I won't spoil it, but I love that it does throw DK Vine a bone that yes, this game is plausibly taking place in the same universe. So I feel like Donkey Kong fans will not be disappointed there. Like, there's a Donkey Kong reference within the first 2 minutes of the game. It's kind of absurd how fast they get it out of the way. So, kudos.
Yeah.
I'm blown away with how much of everything I love about this game. Honestly, I was looking forward to this game. This was the game I was looking forward to the most this year. As soon as it was announced, I was like, yes, this is what I want. It's like my game of E3 2019. But I am still kind of taken aback by how much I do enjoy this game, how much I adore it. And like, it's still way early to say. I don't want to go into like Donkey Kong 64 review mode, flashback 20 years ago to me heaping praise on that. But I feel like this is going to go down as one of my all-time favorites. And I don't foresee anything changing my mind as I continue to play it.
Yeah, it's good. I think that they have done a solid job in making. And remember, I was one of the people that, in the end, ultimately did like Yooka-Laylee. They've made a better 2D platformer than they made a 3D platformer, and they've just continued to grow and learn more about what they are capable of doing and executing on that in a really cool way, and in a way that is, I think, very exciting to see. Not just what's going to be in this game, but what comes next. Love it. Good game.
Yeah, it's basically the answer to anybody who has doubted Playtonic. And it definitely makes you excited for the potential for the future when you see just how good this game is. Well, yeah, shit, yeah. Give me more. Give me more Playtonic games. I am completely on board. So, and I would say that even if I wasn't a B character in the game. And Mitchell would probably be saying that even if he wasn't in the credits, although we can't fully trust him, can we?
No, you really can't. I'm super paid off. Everyone at Playtonic each gave me $1, so I'm practically rolling in it right now.
Yeah. I can't do the maths there, Mitchell. How much would that total up to?
It's crazy. It's $17 million.
This has been a File 2 production.
Doop, boop, 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 doop, boop, 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 boop.